Yeah. But it was the issue. It's too.
Good.
Well, it's 3:30. Can you hear us loud and clear from Gray? Thanks for starting the recording.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, good. I thought just while we wait for Buller to join us, I think I might ask the members of the TA team, the planners, to just go around and introduce themselves because, yeah, it's an important meeting as far as that side of things is concerned, and it'll be good to know the TA team. So I'll just check who we got. Is Lois, are you on the? Lois is there. Joe Armstrong, are you there?
No worries.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. So okay.
You've got Doug and Chu as well,
Yeah.
but we've got two more. Deborah is here from Westland. Do you want to say hi, Deb?
Oh, Deborah. Right. Thank you.
Oh, we've got three.
Okay. So
I am here. Hello.
Hello. So just before we make a start, so Janine and Deborah, at least could you just
And Michael.
And Michael, yeah, introduce yourself, brief background, and as I say, we look forward to your contribution during the workshop. So Janine, could you start, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Janine Kidd-Smith, and I've been engaged by the West Coast Regional Council members of the TT, or by the council, to act as a planner and advisor to the members of the committee. And so my background, I'm a planner. I'm based in Napier. I work for Sage Planning, and I have quite a few years experience working on district plans and district plan reviews.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Deborah.
So my name's Deborah Patterson. I'm the senior planner at Westland District Council. I've been here on and off for almost 4 years now, and I have a planning qualification.
Thank you. Michael.
Afternoon all, Michael McNamee, Regulatory Manager at Grey District. Prior to being the Regulatory Manager, I was in the planning team. Been at Council 10 years and have been in the Technical Advisory team since its inception at the start of this process.
Yeah, thank you. And Doug, perhaps we could hear from you.
I think, okay, you can hear me all right. Yeah, I'm Doug Bray. I'm the TTPP team. I've been with the team for just under a year now. Prior to that, I was with Grey District Council for about 6 months or so. So 6 to 9 months. So I've got a reasonable familiarity with that. Prior to that sort of thing, I have worked for consultants and also for Heritage New Zealand, and also previously worked for the Department of Conservation.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Good.
Yeah.
I think we know everybody else. So I'll formally open the meeting. Welcome. Any apologies recorded?
Councillor Casson.
Councillor Casson, yeah, thank you. And we heard from Francois. He'll probably join us at some stage. But in the meantime, we'll note the apology from Councillor Casson. Okay. Then the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February, was it? 28th of March. 28th of March, minutes of that. Anybody got any comment as to the accuracy? Anything to be added? I could just look at on page 3 of the minutes, that is page 4 of our papers. In the second paragraph, It reads that Ms. Bolm said they might extend the time period. I think, I'm not sure who they is in that context, and I think we could just assume that she said that the time period may be extended rather than a reference to they, because the way it reads there, they could be referred to the submitters. I think it's important that we have around that kind of detail some accuracy. So I propose we amend it to say Ms. Baum said the time period may be extended, but not confirmed yet, etc. We're okay with that, generally? So with that amendment, I'll move that we approve those minutes as a true record of that meeting. Someone to second that, councillor. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you, Gary. Any matters arising from those minutes with that correction? There are none. Can we move to the financial report for the 28th of Feb? Ask Joe Armstrong to speak to this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The February statement shows that costs are ahead of those expected as far as the budget is concerned, and that there's an unfavourable variance against budget of 587,801 at this point in time, or the end of February that was. The main variants are the ones that we've been discussing for some time now, mostly through the consultant contractor item and the hearing commissioner fees. So I'll just give you a little bit of explanation about that. Expenditure on the consultants and contractors in February came about through the variation to coastal hazard hearing preparation, which was the final hearing in March. Work continued on both the mineral extraction and the noise topics, plus some further mapping on outstanding natural landscapes. And so these were topics that all required further expert planning and other expert input above what was originally budgeted for. I have highlighted for most of this financial year that there would be insufficient budget for the hearing commissioner fee item, and expenditure on that is continuing because of the deliberations and report writing that's underway at the moment. But I do think that the full year forecast that I put forward earlier in the year may have been overstated. So if you just go down to table 1, I'll just talk you through that briefly. In column 4, which is the full year forecast, if you go down near the bottom of that, there's a hearing commissioner fee forecast for about $1.3 million. And I don't anticipate that we'll reach that this financial year. So that's good news. And while we're actually on having a look at that table, I thought I'd just quickly run through what the 6 columns are, because it's always good to have a refresher. The full year budget that's been set, let's have a look at the expenditure for employee costs, because that's the top line for expenditure. The full year budget was set at $303,000. And if you go to the year-to-date budget in column 2, so that's for the first 8 months to the end of February, so that's 2/3 of the budget is anticipated to be spent. So of the 303, we would anticipate would spend about 202 by the end of February, and the actual that we have spent to date in column 1 is 109. So in column 3, where we're still looking at the year to date, the variance is a positive variance of 92,000 that's under budget for this time of year. So if we just look at one last thing, the final column, column 6, the full year variance, is the difference between the full year budget and what has been spent to date. So you take away the actuals that have been spent in column 1 from the full year budget in column 5, and what it tells us is that for the rest of the year we still have 193,000 of what we budgeted to spend. But if you look down that column, you'll see those 2 items in red, the contractor and the hearing commissioner fees that have already exceeded the the annual budget that we set. So that actually is, it shows you that there's still a lot unspent in the budget on other items. So we're doing okay with those ones, the ones that we haven't been tracking. If we go back to the body of the report, point 3, there are additional media costs. So we had just gone over what we would anticipated in our budget for the media costs, and really largely due to advertising materials for Variation 2, because at the time the budget was set, we didn't know we were going to be doing a Variation 2, because that was quite early last year when the budget was set. And if we just look at the final point, number 5, we were anticipating that recommendation reports would come through from the hearing panel, that we'd get the last ones in July, which would mean they'd done their final deliberations in writing in June, which is in this financial year. But as we've explained, deliberations are taking longer, particularly because of the integration issues across the whole plan and adding some variations and postponing the ecosystems hearing. So that's all had a bit of an impact. And so the final reports are not now due until the middle of August. So that means that the hearing commissioners are actually going to be working for a couple of months into the 2026 financial year. I had anticipated that there was likely to be some slippage, so I'd put $50,000 into the hearing commissioner fees for the draft budget for 2026 that you approved. But now that we know that they'll probably all be working for a couple of months, I'm just recommending in this financial report recommendations that we increase that 50,000 to 125 for next financial year to help cover that. So if you look down 3 pages to table 3, I've just highlighted where the changes occurred. Everything else in that draft budget remains the same, but the hearing commissioner fees I'm anticipating will be higher, which takes the expenditure up. But that will be somewhat balanced out by the fact I don't think we're going to spend as much as was forecast in this year on the hearing commissioner fees, just because the work is moving into a different financial year. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the tables or content of this paper.
Thank you, Jo. And just welcome Mayor Klein and Councillor Nayland. I know you had another meeting, so we acknowledge that things were only just started. We're on the finance report.
Yeah, apologies for lateness.
No, not at all. Oh, fine. Okay, any questions or comments about the financial report?
Question.
Yes, thanks.
Why are the legal fees so high when we haven't made any decisions yet?
We've been taking a lot of advice, legal advice, and on different topics that the hearing commissioners have requested in particular. And yeah, that was not unanticipated. It's quite normal to be getting legal advice during this process. Make sure that the recommendations that come through to you in the hearing reports are well-founded, well-grounded.
Anything else? Anybody else? No? Could somebody move that the financial report to the 28th of February received? Yeah. No. Thanks, Councillor. Seconded by Mayor Gibson. All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Is that okay? Okay, this next item is an update on the national planning instruments. We hear from Lois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to the committee. So this is just an information report for you. I thought it would be useful to just get a bit of an update on where things are at, because we have had a lot of announcements from the government over the last 18 months about things that they're going to do to the planning framework. And as time has passed, it's become really evident that most of those things were being delayed. We keep getting dates and delays are coming through. So what I've tried to do with this report is just give you an update of the kind of the word from the government now. They've issued a cabinet paper and done some significant announcements on kind of their work program for the next 18 months until the next election. So I guess just the reason why this is important is because whatever is put in the national planning instruments, we have to implement. That's a requirement on Te Taipōtini plan. Just for those perhaps who are not familiar, there's two types of national planning instruments. There are national policy statements, and those set a broad direction. They might be quite detailed and quite specific, but they direct us to change the plan to implement those national policy statements. Then there's national environmental standards, and national environmental standards are kind of like the government writes the rule book. And so from our perspective, they effectively replace whatever rules we might have. And so it's quite important to just differentiate between the two. And I guess in summary, what I would say is that what the government has said is, like the last government, they're reforming the RMA, they're going to replace it, like the last government, with two acts. And we expect to see those draft bills come out before the end of the year. It's a big piece of work for the Ministry for the Environment to write these new pieces of legislation. And so the government has said, we know we announced we were going to do a whole lot of other things, but actually not. We're just going to do the minimum that we think we need to do to progress the policy that's already been developed. And we're going to hold all the rest of those things to be incorporated in the new acts. And particularly what they've said is we're not going to change national policy statements too much, because they don't want district and regional councils to have to do a lot of work that would be unnecessary when the new acts come out. They're saving all of that policy direction for the new acts. So just in terms of the, the burden in terms of work for the committee and your staff, and for the costs, very important for Te Taipōtini plan, that's really good news. It might not be good news for those who are concerned about some of the policy direction that the previous government gave, but it is good news from a cost perspective. So essentially, the direction they said is they were proposing quite a lot of changes to things like the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, that's something committee's been very interested in. Also the National Policy, New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. They're not going to do those things now. They're just going to do the kind of the minimum that they can. So kind of a mixed bag, I guess, in terms of the news from that perspective. But what it does mean is that you'll be able to proceed with some quite good level of confidence that the decisions that you make on Te Taipōtini plan aren't going to be immediately need to be undone or amended based on these on new policy direction. That there will be a bit of a gap in time while the government gets its entire kind of RMA reform agenda sorted out. So that's essentially, in summary, what the paper is saying. So very happy to just take any questions from the committee.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes.
So where are we thinking regional policy statements aren't mentioned in this report? So again, I'm banging on about the SNAs as I normally do. Again, they have indicated really that the policy changes will be that councils, they're indicating that we've heard that councils, if they want to enforce SNAs on landowners, that we will have to be compensating. So where does that leave us if we carry through with our plans that we have in the TPP, which we don't want SNAs, but we're having to map them within 5 years? Where is it leaving us?
So the government previously
direction from the government.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. The government previously put the requirement to identify SNAs or new SNAs on hold until next year, 2026. Yes. No, put it on hold for 3 years, sorry. So there's no work currently underway to identify any new SNAs. So that is on hold.
Sorry, Lois, could I interrupt? So you're breaking up a little bit. So would you mind, this is an important topic, would you mind just going back to the start of your response slowly, please?
Sorry, yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. So the government previously has put on hold and passed the changes to the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, saying that we have 3 years now to identify SNAs. That's put on hold. So there's no work underway or required at this moment to identify SNAs. But what they have said is they're not going to make any further changes to the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity in this term. That National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity still is law, it still applies. So apart from the things that have been put on hold, we do have to implement it. Of course, it came out after TTPP, so TTPP can only be modified to the extent that was made in submissions. So practically what that means is that essentially this will still be a matter that you have to deal with kind of in about, after the next election. So we don't need to necessarily, you'll have to make some decisions on the ecosystems and biodiversity topic, which are consistent with the current national direction, but you won't necessarily have to do anything further to progress any identification of SNAs, and obviously it would be prudent to wait until the new acts are passed and whatever the government's new direction on Indigenous biodiversity comes out. But at the moment, I guess, the message that it's not a great message. The message I'm trying to give you is the government has made lots of announcements over the last 18 months and very few of them have made it into law. So we can't assume until they make it into law, because we kept getting told, well, we have changes, they'll be ready in August, they'll be ready in October, they'll be ready in February. The next one I'm hearing is they'll be ready in May. But until the law is changed, we have to implement the law that is in front of us. But the one law that has changed is that we don't currently have to implement the SNA provisions. They're on hold.
So would it be prudent to hold that the biodiversity chapter to one of our last decision-making through our process to the last, just in case we get more direction around it from the government?
Well, certainly it will be one of the last because it was one of the last hearings. So it will be one of the last ones that comes through to you. But I'm not even sure that we will see the draft RMA replacement bills before the end of the year. That's the date they're currently talking about, is they're aiming to have them introduced by the end of the year. But that's, as I say, we've had a lot of slippage with other dates that have been announced. So I'm not holding my breath on that. So I wouldn't expect we're going to see, because that's what the cabinet paper says. We can't expect any new national direction that's going to have a substantive influence on Te Taipōtini plan coming out this year, or coming out really before the election next year.
Other questions? If I could just ask as a point of clarification, you mentioned, I understood that it would be 3 years before any action was required. Is that
so the government put, I'm trying to remember now, I think it was 4 specific clauses in the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity on hold. So it said these do not need to be progressed at this point in time, and it changed the date that they need to be progressed. And of course, one of those was the obligation to go out and identify new SNAs. So that's literally been put on hold, that requirement on us, for 3 years. So they've done that by changing the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, and they did that last year.
But the regional policy statement still directs that we have to. So where does that leave us?
They only put those few clauses on hold. So all of the rest of the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity is still something we have to implement. It's still a piece of national direction that we're required to give effect to.
Sorry, but to me it makes a joke of us being a committee or a plan or anything if we can't decide for ourselves. I mean, we should be able to put that on hold until they make up their mind. Why should we continue on?
Well, the way
crazy.
it works, through you, Mr. Chair, is that we have to implement the law, which is in place at the time that we're doing our work. And so the government hasn't rescinded the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity as a whole. It's only put those 4 clauses on hold. So we have to, if they'd wanted to delete the whole thing, they could have done so, but they have chosen not to. So
can we not write to the government and get a better clarification of it all?
So we have
And tell them our position.
ongoing communication, and this is something we have also had legal advice on. I think our lawyers have spoken previously to the committee on this. So I guess there's there is no change in terms of what the government has said in its actual national policy statements. We hear statements from politicians, but until they change the law, we have to implement the law. And what's come out from the cabinet paper now is that they're not planning to change the law in relation to the national policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity this year or next year. They're proposing instead that they'll be building this new resource management system and replacing the RMA completely, and that will include all of the national direction. So, I mean, I guess that's the latest update, is that they're not planning any further changes to the national policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity.
Thank you.
Through the chair, could I ask a question of
Yes.
Lois? We brought this up before. The SNAs that have been identified and lawfully established is we have asked the minister in the past, but you've got any clarification on that? Doesn't look like they'll be rubbed out. They'll be just remain, won't they? It's just the new. There's no requirement to actually identify any further. So for several years more, so just do nothing.
That's correct. Yes. So all the existing ones, there's no change in relation to those. It's about the process of identifying further SNAs. And I think particularly, and this has concerned the committee over a number of years, the criteria for those. And so we had been hoping that the government was going to review all of that, but they've put it off, but certainly it doesn't affect the existing SNAs.
We have been getting indications through the chair from politicians that this is not the case, and that, as I said before, that the direction is going to completely change. So, you know, we're getting conflicted messages. Is it worth writing to the government about transition planning and how this may affect it and the stages that we're at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, I guess it's always useful to seek clarification from the government. But I guess I'd say that this cabinet paper has come out very recently, and this is, and from the announcements from Minister Bishop, which happened a few weeks ago, they have made a reasonably clear position that they're not following through with some of those past statements at this point in time, and that their intention is to instead focus on the new acts that will replace the RMA. They have talked a little bit about transition, which I think was discussed at the last committee meeting, and it does look like that what they're proposing are much better transition procedures than the previous government's round of replacements for the RMA acts. But until we see the bills, we won't know the detail. And I guess I mean, it could be useful to write to the minister, but I suspect he'll say wait until you see the draft bills coming out.
So, Mayor Gibson, do you want to move that we write?
Yes.
I mean, there's no harm done, I would suggest.
Well, I don't think that there's any harm if we move to get some direction at the stages that we're at, because I know we can't stop it. I know we can't, you know, we need to get those zoning and other things through, but if we get some clarification, if they're going to completely change direction, which is saying they're not, but we're getting indications from politicians that they are, then we need some clarity.
Yep. So could I suggest that, well, any other comments about the principle of whether we write or not, whether the committee writes or not? Oh, sorry, no, hearing it. Yes. No.
Yeah, I agree with Tanya. I think, especially if they're going to change the parameters of what an SNA is defined as. I mean, we're leaving ourselves wide open here as far as we classify someone's land and then the government changes the rules, and then what happens then? We've got to go back and revisit it all and then take it.
Or compensate them.
Compensate them or something. I don't know, but I mean, they talk of compensation, but we've got to have.
We have to make every effort.
We have to make every effort to carry on what we're doing. I can do all the rest of it. They gave us an extension for the plan, didn't they? We wrote to them, they gave us an extension. When does that extension finish?
Joe Armstrong, can you confirm the 2 years?
14th of January.
Of next year.
2026. Yeah.
we don't want to do SNAs and we have to do everything in our power to make sure that it doesn't happen and then on encroaching on our private land rights.
Okay, so I think we're agreed on, I don't see any other comments from committee members, we're agreed on the principle of it. It's the question of how do we do that, and I would suggest that we get a draft written, just a few sentences, and circulate the draft around committee members and get a response within the next few days so that we can get that letter away. So I think Mayor Gibson is moving along those lines, that we agreed on the principle of responding to government, and that we circulate a draft just to make sure that we're happy. It's not the sharpest way to do it, but I think to get something done, we should move along those lines. Any comments about that? So moved by Mayor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Gibson, all along those lines, all in favour? Aye. Aye. Thank you. So, yes.
I don't think we'll be pretty pushed to get it out by tomorrow. We might have to do it next week, or someone, whoever's doing it.
Right. I'm looking to Joe Armstrong to prepare a draft, and that will be circulated in the early days of next week, Monday or Tuesday. And once we've got agreement on that, we'll go from there.
I know we've got an extension, but the clock is still ticking.
Oh, yeah.
We have to move on it.
Well, the extension, though, is to get the plan complete.
Yeah.
So the SNA issue is off to one side, but we must move on it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you to Lois for that report. The next item on the agenda is the project manager's report. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just letting you know that we've been responding to Local Government Official Information Act requests about commissioner costs and contractors employed on TTPP following some discussion that you've had at an earlier meeting. You know that the final hearing on Variation 2 took place in March, and that was our last one. And so we're at the stage now where the final report's being written for natural hazards and the final update of a recommendations report from the reporting officer being written for mineral extraction, and largely everything else is complete from contract planners on that at this time. Last at your March meeting, there was a query raised about a media article that said that some areas were going to be removed from the mineral extraction zone. And as I said then, that was an inaccurate report. It was actually based on the recommendation report from the reporting planner for that topic. So no decisions for that to happen have been made, because you're the people who would be making that decision, and nothing has changed in the mineral extraction zone since we notified the plan about 3 years ago. So I just want to confirm that, but also just give you this little bit of follow-up that the hearing panel undertook after they got the recommendations report. They issued minute 57 way back in January, asking for parties to provide further information, the people who were impacted by the recommended amendments or reductions or deletions to the mineral extraction zone on their properties that had been recommended by the planner. So the deadline for that's passed. They had 6 weeks or something to provide all the information back through, and quite a lot of stuff did come in, and currently that is with the reporting planner, who is updating his recommendations report, which will go to the commissioners, and they'll use that updated report in their deliberations and when they make recommendations to you. So the commissioners do follow through on these sorts of queries and things that are raised in reports. They don't just suddenly become part of TTPP. Just to clarify that, if you've got any questions on that or any other points, I'm happy to answer them.
Mayor Gibson.
We just had an email about a Lagoima not being answered or rejected, and it's been going to quite a few of the committee members. Is there any comments around that?
I haven't seen that, but was it a Lagoima about people's
Qualifications.
qualifications? Yes, that was just considered. I'm sure that says in the Lagoima response, an HR matter when these people were hired, and not something to, that to be shared.
Oh, sorry, I don't understand that. You're comfortable with that explanation? Okay, thank you.
I didn't know if that was the reason.
Yeah.
Additional information.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments on the project manager's update? None. Could somebody move by Mayor Gibson, seconded by Mayor Klein, that the update be received? All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
We'll very briefly go into confidential public excluded so that we can consider the confidential minutes of the meeting held at 10:30 on the 28th of March. So everybody happy that we move into confidential? I don't have the long explanation in front of me, but I'll ignore that. And all in favour of that? Aye.